Hi everyone, I'm Rafat. I'm the director of the Khan, which is a partner of OpenScape, a transnational platform for curatorial exchanges that started a couple of years ago in the pandemic to bring together partners that want to kind of reclaim the intimacy that happened in contemporary art and cultural circulation that was lost in the pandemic. But what happened after the project started was that the world was open again, and we shifted kind of the programming to allow each of the partners to create to host conversations or online events that relay their questions. This is the fourth hosting we have, and it's hosted by the Khan. And the title of this conversation is Prototyping Cultural Practices, bringing together institutions and artists that are trying to push different modalities of work that either critique or invent new cultural practices. So today is our fourth conversation before our town hall on the 28th. And I'm very happy and thankful that we have Iris and Kees to join me today in this. I will leave them, actually. They're going to have the conversation. But I'm going to give like a very brief introduction on each, and then they're going to give some context and jump into it. So Iris Hamping Chi is an independent curator based in Taiwan, and she's the president of the Taiwan Art Space Alliance and member of the curatorial team Insider. Kees is joining us from Brussels, and he is the performance art programmer at Musem, the Nomadic Art Center. This is going to be available on YouTube later if you didn't watch it live, and there's no Q&A now, but in the town hall on February 28th, 2:30 p.m. Central European time, we're going to be able to have everyone that participated in this conversation join in for a more interactive event. And I'm going to leave it to you. Thanks so much. If you need me, I'm in the background.
Thank you, Rafat.
Thank you, Rafat.
Hello, Iris.
Hello, Kees. So I guess that's only you and me right now.
It's only you and me right now.
Nice, yeah.
Good talk.
Great. So, so should I kind of start? I mean, like I can start to kind of introduce myself a little bit, and then maybe we can also have further conversation about some topic that we are kind of discussed earlier. So just give everyone have some kind of idea about who and I. So I, especially about the topic I want to also have in conversation with Kees today, because I want to share my 10 years working experience on the residency program. And one project, one organization I work with is called the Bamboo Curtain Studio, that's based in Taipei, in New Taipei City in Taiwan. And before entering to this studio, actually I have no idea what is the residency program. I have no idea why the artists need the time and space to develop their work. But I guess once I step into, once I join the team, I figure out actually it is really necessary for the artists to really explore their idea before they really put into like a final output, like exhibition or performance. And I gained so much kind of idea when I was in the Bamboo Curtain Studio, because it was quite legendary, quite kind of the very important residency space in Taiwan, because it was the kind of pioneer one to show the cases and also show the example to the government, like to prove that it is very necessary for the Taiwan artists to have the space like this, or to have the program like the residency, in order for them to traveling within Taiwan or outside of the Taiwan, and also welcome the international artists to come over to engage with our local community, something like that. And what is interesting about this organization, because in 2021, it was celebrating the 25th anniversary. It's already 25 years, but it was also the year they decided to close down. So we have a lot of conversation before, like how one organization start from a very organic way, like it's more like an artist, that four artists decided to change this vacant space. The vacant space where used to raise the chicken before, the warehouses, but more transferring into the artist studio, or later on they decided to like welcome the international artists or local artists to stay over and then to kind of develop something together. So there are some kind of transition moment, and they're also having kind of time like when they are only 2 people in-house, 2 people welcome the artists, but later on we have like 4 or 5 people as a team to really have the structuralize the way how we are running the program. And in the end, I mean, before a couple years before the studio decided to close, they also kind of discussing about how are they going to how are we going to sustain ourselves, in what kind of form, whether we should maintain our space or maybe we should just like a partnership with our partner or stay with our partner, then we don't have our own physical space anymore. So we do have a lot of conversation, and I guess all different kind of the conversation or different kind of transformation, it actually representing the time, because as time went on, like we all need different kind of we all need different kind of the need, let's say this way. Because before, I guess in the early 80s in Taiwan, especially, all the artists really need a space to exhibit or to have the performance over there with very kind of experimental project. But I guess nowadays, the artists actually need more resource or more connection. So let's actually impact the institution to decide what will be their next step. So I guess that's kind of roughly the idea about the space where I used to work with, the Bamboo Curtain Studio. And yeah, and then so I would just like to stop here first, and maybe like, because I do have a lot of questions about Cass, about your space as well.
Thank you, Iris. Yeah, I already have as well a lot of questions to you. It's interesting that you talk about the transformation, the transition of the Bamboo Curtain Studio. Because that's for Musum, it's also the case right now. We are really in a kind of moment of transition and a shift in our work. And I just for you to portrait a bit like the history, because we can mirror somehow some things in time, because Musum now exists 22 years, and it started as a very organic, as a grassroots organization. My colleague and founder, director of Musum, Mohamed Ikoban, started within the Moroccan community with the kind of cultural exchanges with Morocco and North Africa, just to invite writers, small music groups. And so slowly this became a festival, a seasonal event. And then we grow through the years to an art center without our own space. That's why we are a nomadic art center, and it's still this, and it developed towards like with our programming, with our programs, with the artists we invited, with the content we brought, other perspectives to intervene in other institutions. So to go really fast, like today we are this art center presenting their programs in other institutions. We have a large network of musea, of other theaters, other institutions where we collaborate with to bring our program. And so this is a kind of, it became a model which worked very well, interesting in the sense that you really break up the programming of other institutions. And in different formats. For example, now we have a festival, it's called Musum Cities, where we invite like artistic scene from a particular city in the Middle East or North Africa to Brussels, and in different venues we create like film program, theater program, or this is one of the formats. But throughout the year, we concentrate on the support of artists. Like we host artists, local artists and international residencies, where we try to support artists for a longer term, let's say. And we are a kind of intermediary between the artists and the other institutions. to do this work in a proper way, we felt really the need to have our own space. So we are now at this point, we are still nomadic in our programming, but we have our own ateliers and offices where we can host artists. And this it's very recent, just 1.5 years that we landed in a neighborhood, Heijvaart, really close to the Brussels center. A very interesting neighborhood with it's a kind of a neighborhood which I could call like a kind of neighborhood where it's a transit place. Let's say newcomers, people who are temporarily working in Brussels, they arrive there. There's a different diasporas, a large West African community, large Moroccan, Algerian community, recently Syrian community. It's a very particular neighborhood with a lot of challenges. So we landed there with our residency space. And I think the challenges we have is that we have access in our programming to these different institutions, musea, places. And at the same time, we want to reconnect to this neighborhood. And this is our, this is let's say the biggest challenge for the moment. How do we connect again to this neighborhood? Because throughout the years, we have to realize that we are a small we became kind of small institution. We intervene in other institutions, but at the same time, we act like in a kind of same logic. And that's fascinating because when we go back, like started as a very organic grassroots organization with volunteers, and this dynamic we lost in a way, and we behave kind of institutional. So now we want to reconnect with the neighborhood, but it's a complete. Again, we have to invent, to reinvent, to rethink how we could do this, because we have kind of classical reflex on. Okay, that's wonderful. There's an artist. The artist has a project. Let's say about there was an artist working on the narrative of Amazigh, the indigenous people of North Africa, with objects, a kind of storytelling. So he comes to us. He's working in our space, and he asks some people in Brussels to tell their stories and to integrate this in his practice and in his work. So this is the kind of first reflex to do, to invite an artist with a project and connect it to the neighborhood. But it's a very, in my opinion, also a very limited classical way how to work. It has nothing to do with neighboring and how we find a kind of proximity with the neighborhood, and we go into a kind of real exchange, that we find a kind of connection in this neighborhood, and we make like a bridge towards also the other institutions where we work. So this is a kind of the moment we are now, and we have to find out and to rethink how this could work, and how this we could benefit from the model we have already, and invent new things. So I'm also very interested what you say about like with the Bamboo Curtain Studio, how it developed. But you mentioned also something like how it went towards community, or I'm very curious how you managed, was it suggestions, was it questions from artists who were willing to do this, or did you promote that in a way, or what a particular needs to do this?
Yeah, actually, I think when you mentioned about this physical space, like having the really like home, let's say this way, like people can really, I mean, I know it's kind of necessary in a way, even though it's so hassle to really kind of maintain the space. But the reason why I say it's necessary is because most of the time when we share our story with other people, everyone all want to come to our space because they want to see the space in real. They want to know where is artist stay and what kind of your projects do, and then where is the site. So then that's the time when we really feel like, oh yeah, it is really nice to having our own space, because when everyone want to know where exactly the space we are working on, or the space happen, the things happen, they want to see. Because as I said right now, and also the director of the residency platform called the TASA, we only have the office. So wherever everyone want to see what we are doing, then I cannot say, but we only have the office. I mean, like all the project is actually outside because we partnership with our partner, and it's happening maybe outside of the city or in somewhere else. But then it makes them feel a little bit sad because they can already see real. So when you mention about this kind of physical space, actually, I also feel like kind of mixed feeling about it as well. And then in terms of the Bamboo Curtain Studio, because it was actually not inside of the community, it was actually the location-wise, it's actually near the riverside. So there's a kind of gap between our space and the community, because there is a kind of metro line kind of cut the space. So most of the time for the community people, they would just like jump onto the metro. I mean, they get the metro and all the way to the center, because we are a little bit kind of outside of the center. So they would just get to the station and just take the metro stop and just go into the center. They didn't really want to cross the metro line to the other part, the riverside. So like as I mentioned, like the Bamboo Curtain Studio actually started in 1995. So it's that almost the first 10 years, it's just purely the artist studio. So they just do their own projects inside of the studio. They don't really engage. We don't really engage with the local community. We don't really engage with the neighborhood. But not until there's one project called the art project called the environment. It's more like called the Plum Tree Creek. So basically there's a creek inside of the community, and we are more like in the river mouth. So we are in the end. So we use this creek, this river, and to then try to engage through the water to engage with the community. So instead of asking the community people to come to our space, we actually go to them. So we bring the artists along this riverside, along this creek, and all the way to the upstream. And then because this creek actually goes through the neighborhood, the community, and then all the way to the upstream is more actually natural space, environmental space. So we actually follow different, we choose different location to engage with the local people who live there and try to gather their kind of story. So it's around like almost 3 years kind of project, and also working with the local school as well. I guess that's kind of the first kind of the transition time for the Bamboo Curtain Studio, to start to really like feel, oh, artists shouldn't be just like in their own studio. Artists should also work out and also engage with local. And then because I also mentioned later on, not just the local artists stay in our studio, we start to welcome the international artists. And when they come to our space for 1 month or 2 months, they also want to know what exactly the culture, the Taiwan culture, or what are we focusing about in terms of the environmental art, or in terms of the social justice, and they want to know more. And I guess that's the time when Bamboo Curtain Studio, I mean, we as a kind of the coordinator, we are more like a window contact. We are like window. We are kind of explaining what is Taiwan, what we do here, and we just give them that kind of orientation, and then we give them to share and like, oh, you can, if you want to do some project related with the indigenous culture, here are the person you can ask. If you want to do some environmental project, here are the neighbor, as I mentioned, that we have the natural park nearby. You can go there and you ask about the specialists over there. Or if you want to explore more about the art scene, because there's a art university, it's also not too far from us. So we kind of link them with different like partners or the organization we know. So I guess what we do at that time is that we divided our path into two parts. One is more like an artist in residency, like a professional artist kind of training development. The other one is more engaged with the environmental art with the community. So then we only have like 5 people in-house, I mean, in terms of the management team. So we have like 2 or 3 people working on the residency program and welcome like recommend Taiwan artists to go outside or like host the international artists. But we also have 1 or 2 members work on the community engagement. So we'll create some kind of events and then work with them. But it's always quite difficult to manage both, because in terms of the funding issue, or in terms of the manpower issue, or in terms of this kind of community project, it's always like it takes time and effort and energy, because you really have to go in. I mean, my colleague who really engaged with this community project, she's actually really like go into the community area and talk with the local shop or like local people who are also interested to know what we are doing. But because they are also working as well, so they are not able to just say, okay, I will join your project anytime. No, because they also have like a maybe 9 to 5 kind of working pattern, or they run their own business. So we have to figure out how can we kind of engage with them, but not necessarily create them too much burden, because if we cannot scale them, they will not want to collaborate with us anymore. So I guess that's one of the project, that was one of the strategy we kind of do at that time.
Yeah, it's what is very interesting to hear is that you mentioned that it costs also time, and it needs like a kind of investment to inhabit a space yourself, before to facilitate like, or to open this window for artists that they can connect and that they can work. And I think that's very, very interesting point, because this timing, this need of a kind of the development of let's say to create the ground that this can happen, the connections to a community, to the social needs in a neighborhood, is a completely different time frame than what, for example, institutions programming is asking also from us. Like beforehand, I need this program, it has to be there presented and in this time frame, and I'm very fascinating about this friction in this different time. And yeah. I think that's a bit our point where we are now, to find the different ways how we connect in the first place ourselves in a proper way to the neighborhood, and not to impose, not to also to see what is happening in the neighborhood before imposing things, like just searching for what is an urgent community project. Okay, we connect to it. Is there an artist who can work with that? It's not a way to establish these kind of things. The image of window is wonderful. I have the image of a window, but also a kind of a membrane like open something where what breathes,
Mm,
and the idea that what is happening in a neighborhood could echo through our work also towards other institutions.
mm,
When I had to think about our conversation, I thought, okay, I'm super happy how we work, that we have earned this right in other institutions to have kind of time slots to be able to work there. But at the same time, I don't agree anymore. I feel like it's agreement. I want more space in these institutions, because it became also formal. Okay, you have these 3 days, you do a programming, but on beforehand it's super clear as this is the programming. You don't as if you don't have enough openness to. It's a bit a trap of this institutional programming. Like we became part of it. And actually, you want more freedom also for us and towards those institutions to really be free and to have time and space to really come up with a kind of alternative programming. So I think we have to in some collaborations we have to negotiate that.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's also quite mixed feeling as well, because when we do the programming, we want to have the concrete outline. We need the timing. We want to know exactly the schedule, because if we set up the date of the opening, then before that we want to make sure when are we going to finish what and when. But then sometimes that, especially like when we are just developing some idea or do some brainstorming, it takes so much time. And then in order to persuade the people we are partner with, either they are from local people or they are from different partners, but that takes time. But then we also know, but the opening days over there, we have to be aware, cautious about the timing wise as well. So this kind of I don't know, it's like also quite struggle in a way, but we also don't want to spoil, like to destroy the creativity as well, because inside, creativity also need the time to develop, and also the time to really, you need to give the room for that. Otherwise, it seems that if we make the box first, if we create the box first, then it's not going to have a great result. But so when because I also like a coordinating different thing, or like as a curator, do different project. But on the one hand, I really appreciate the artists really give so much idea. But on the other hand, I also kind of have to push the artist, say, but we also have there something we have to accomplish in the end. Yeah. So I guess that's also one. But then I guess I'm also very curious about how Musan City decided to be more like institutionalized. Because in the beginning, just the very like you guys just want to share the different culture, isn't it? But when is exactly the moment that you decided maybe you need to have like I don't know, full-time people or like a more structuralized team in order to kind of expand the concept?
Yeah, it just happened also kind of organically to get subventions from the government and to be able to work and to and then you get slowly into this this official structure of how to work, what to present, when, and how to develop your work. So then it became slowly a small institution, let's say. Yeah, it's just this also by surviving and doing the work better than we did before, let's say. And
Interesting. So actually, I think I kind of mentioned earlier about the way how we partnership with our neighbor organization, and because the creek I mentioned about the Plum Tree Creek we work with, because that is related with the environmental art. And what is fascinating is that because through this project, we actually meet different people from different professions. So we meet the people from the they are environmental educator, or they are scientists, because when we talk about the water issue, the pollution issue, then you actually not just as an artist just propose the question, and not just the community people notice the issue, but we actually also want to have more professional kind of suggestion. So that was the time we actually start to work with, or having the different consultant who have the biology or environmental kind of background. And I guess that's also the quite a big moment for most of the artists that we work with, is they start to have the idea like how to collaborating with people from different fields.
Yeah.
How to, very like a cross-discipline kind of the collaborations. But I have to say,
I'm curious, do you install this, or is it in basically a question of artists, or do you suggest?
I don't know. I guess it's also quite mixed as well. Yeah, I guess it's just at a certain point, I guess it's the curator at that time decided to say we should welcome for different voices. Yeah, so they start to, and luckily we had the local one. Some of the local people, they actually is the environmental educators. So they live in the community, and they join our group as well to share their knowledge with us and share their research with us. So I guess it's more or less very organic as well. And luckily, we also have our neighbor, which is the Guandu Nature Park. They are environmental education center. So then we engage with them because they have their own profession or their own research, and we have the artists. And I guess at that time for them, they feel like they don't know what is art, but they feel it's quite interesting because artists always ask quite maybe stupid or like strange questions or naive questions. But actually this question brings people to discuss why, or because we always treat things, we always treat things for granted, or we think, oh, it is because it is, but we never really ask why it is, or what's the original problem, something like that. Especially in nowadays, we are also busy at work. We never really kind of notice about our surrounding. So I guess that's the time we start. But however, I also feel they always have the gap because our profession is different. And then when we discuss, we don't know how to really, what exactly the meaning of the collaboration as well. It's like you, artists use art as a method or a way to engage with the natural concept, or environmental, the scientists actually exactly how exactly the collaboration it is. I mean, that's the big question, like what we are facing right now as well.
Could you say that you mostly then facilitate the conversations between them?
Yeah. So basically, it's always conversation.
And it's not an artistic outcome or.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, because like 10 years ago, the project, the art project we mentioned, actually they never really have the final art piece. So everything is about the conversation. So they call it as a movement instead of the artwork. Yeah. And I guess that's also because that was back in 2000, roughly around 2010. So it's like almost 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. So, so I guess that's the time in Taiwan, they start to have the concept about what is the art movement, because before people always feel like you need to have the concrete outcome. You need to have either performance or you need to have the object. piece, something like that. That is art. But they never really feel like conversation can be the art as well. So that is also quite interesting. But that's also a very big challenge to engage with the local people, because they was ask us, where is the art? Are we going to make some artwork together? But and they also asking that, can we do the mural? Because mural is like you can see right there. But conversation is more like just conversation. You cannot see it. So that's always the kind of big challenge for us to really engage with the general public.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of openness to think and to actually to create space within your own organization to leave space for conversation, for people from other fields to come in, for people from the neighborhood to come in, and to guarantee a kind of flexibility. It's urgent and it's needed, because otherwise you'd never get a kind of organic ground of exchange and conversation. And then, it's logic that the trap is always there of programming and very functional with the outcome and towards this place or that place. So it is. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting part also in the shift where Musam is, that we have to rethink this, to open up, to create this space to let things happen, which are different than the logic programming. Yeah. It's also a kind of, ideally, a kind of dream where I think, oh yeah, but there in this space there could something happen that it could be a transit of the topics of the neighborhood going towards other institutions, and to have a kind of house that a center that also thinks by itself, and where you can elaborate more than just the artistic project. And yeah,
I remember there was some certain moment our organization and the artists and also the community people, they actually think maybe it is necessary to have the art festival. Just like you guys, this kind of the art festival, you will have different kind of program. You have the music, you have the market, the art market, or you have the food, everything. Because it was more like happy, I mean, more like entertain, or like people can join, or people like to just have fun. So I guess I remember there was some kind of the time that we actually discussed whether we should have the festival or not. But I guess it's never really happened, because we really like this kind of in-person or more like intimacy kind of engagements. So every time, luckily, because we have the space, I mean, the Bamboo Curtain physical space. So when the artists stay in the studio, we actually just like try to bring them into the community to work with the community leader. So normally the community leader will kind of bring their kind of local people together. So we do the workshop, like so it's more like a pop-up style instead of more like art fair, I mean like art festival style. So sometimes it could work, because I don't know about from your side, but in Taiwan, if you bring a bunch of the foreigner, if you have the foreigner artists in the community, people will feel like curious. Oh, who are you? Where are you from? And sometimes it's really nice for us to really engage with the local people, because if we just approach them, it takes a little bit time, because I don't know, people feel like they are also busy. But if it is a foreigner kind of come into the community, they feel curious. Why? So then it's kind of easy for us to kind of communicate with the local people. So that's also one of our kind of trick in a way to really engage with the local.
Yeah, it's true. That's one way. We now, for the first time, we do little small events in our place. We
Mm.
just started it a few weeks ago. So there's a very small exhibition. So we opened the door a little bit just to explore what's going to happen, and if people want to visit. So that starts a bit. We also try to work with some younger collectives to give them space, and with their let's say community to come in and to just to share the space with them. So these are all ways to explore in the upcoming time, how to see if we could create this open transition of work and thinking, and
I guess it's just like you will let the community people know your existence over there. Just always open the door. They feel, oh, there is something happening here. And when they get used to it, they will say, okay, maybe I can just step in and to see the show or whatever. But it takes time. It always takes time. And also people can't go. Yeah, maybe they come to join the program, but later on they have other business, they will not show up. That is like, it's also happened to our situation as well. I mean, in our community as well. Yeah. And also there's one good thing is that if you can find the local young people who is also quite interesting and try to include them into your program. And that's actually quite helpful as well, because in my other kind of the project that currently I'm working on is that our team is trying to engage with the local people who are also having they also feel really curious about, they really care about their own community. But because in Taiwan, like we have this kind of education system, or like once you go to school, you have to study well, and then you graduate, you need to find a job. So people didn't really care about their own community. It's just a place where you can sleep, you can buy things, and that's it. But then suddenly there are some kind of younger generation, they start to find their own identity about their area. So they also want to do something together. So we kind of include them into our team, and then to try to, and that's actually quite easy, because when we engage with local people, they will just say, I'm the son of the Mr. Robert, or like the Robert, and the community people will know, oh, you are, they know your family, and it's more, give them more like close kind of feeling, and it's quite easy to kind of start the conversation as well. So that's also one of the trick as well when we are engaged with the community.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice to hear. Nice to hear. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Yes. Okay.
I think we leave the conversation by here.
I guess so. Yes.
Hope to see you soon.
Yes, on the 28th, right?